I'm always treat this like it's alien technology. I'm like, okay, we're live. It works. So
how many people do we have? None.
It's not telling me.
no. People are gonna starting to pop up now. Just give it a couple.
All right, I'm gonna paste it and be like,
Yeah.
we are live.
For the folks who are here, thank you for showing up. We're just starting things up, and in the absence of Silas, it's always better to test the technology early. So just give us a couple of minutes before we get this thing going.
So if we're up, how come it doesn't show on like Twitch?
It does. It is on.
Oh,
It is on
It is.
Twitch.
there we go.
Damn it, Grub.
Learn how to use Twitch, G.
And Twitch was invented like after I turned 30, so it doesn't actually exist. But it's okay because we've got 0 people.
Yeah. No, there's 12 now. There's hello, folks. Oh shit. Ryan's here. All right. We'll keep spamming the doc in the chat. Folks want to add some points in there. We have some sort of basic stuff. But it is 10 o'clock. Grug, you want to take it off?
Sure. So welcome to another Glasshouse session. We're rolling fairly full strength today. We've got JAGs, we've got Dave, we've got Pablo and myself. This is after a 1-week hiatus, so we have a huge amount of stuff to go through, which we have not noted down, so we're going to forget pretty much all of it. I think the big things are going to be the ICS malware Ageddon thing, along with probably some of the S4 stuff from the other day. Dave has some insights on some of the attacks that were being done.
I have no insights because I drank at that S4 party and I haven't done a conference in like 3 years now. And I forgot what moderation was supposed to look like, apparently. So now I'm just a jellyfish, to be honest. I oozed my way to the camera.
Dave
never
had
learned
4 beers,
moderation?
and he is like 3 days later, he's still non-functional.
To be honest, when I left, he was just having these little red wines. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if like things took a turn.
Rob Lee started buying my alcohol and I wanted to take advantage of that, apparently.
Fair enough.
You've only yourself to blame. Oh,
Just like
there's the exciting finding that Google Project Zero and Mandiant have different O-Day findings. So Mandiant's O-Day is all North Korea, China, and Russia, and Project Zero was not. Project Zero had different findings.
that gives them better, to me, that gives them better veracity. If they had like exactly the same results, something would be really wrong. But they have different telemetry, they have different reach, they have completely different look on the internal data. It actually was real good. And I actually thought the shape was kind of the same. The shape of the graph in terms of just pure numbers was the same, even if the numbers were different.
Yeah, so I think there's an interesting thing there in that the like we all know, even like Project Zero makes a point that like the number of O-Day that get caught is not a reflection of the number of O-Day that exist or that are being used. It's some subset of that. Like it's not a 100% coverage.
Yeah.
But the fact that
I only count Solaris O-Day as true O-Day.
Right.
So
well, if it's not RPC, it's not even a bug, is it? I mean,
no, I mean, that's a feature or something else. So,
right. You know, like the
should they look the same?
Zero-click Nginx exploit, where you can zero-click the Apache and get a zero-click shell, or as we call it, a zero-click web shell. It's
I'm sorry, guys. You're just being brought into the world of TI where every company sees an entirely different thing, and we all put out quarterly reports, and then like maybe if you put all of them together, then you have an idea of what's happening in like 30% of the world, right?
no, man, you put all these things together, you're still Jon Snow, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Enough.
And that's what I liked about Maddie Stone's report is she's so explicit about like what we don't know that it's like, honestly, I think it makes it less like.
Why
news-
haven't we gotten Maddie Stone on this? Like, let me just put that as a pin for future weeks. Like, we should just, yeah. If it's not a bunch of red tape with Google, then we should bring Maddie on here.
Yeah, I don't think I have a comms channel with her. So someone else will do it. And I could try, but yeah, like it's never come up. So I've never thought about it and no one's ever mentioned it. So really it's your fault, to be honest.
Right, of course. Go ahead, Greg. I don't think we ran through the rest of the points.
No, so I don't know, I guess that's it. I mean, Russia has started an offensive, but they haven't done anything offensive in cyber to stand out. I mean, other than
all of the ICS shit that just got dropped.
but I mean, look, we're talking about cyber war, not taking down the grid. You know,
right. We still the cyber war goalpost only moves further.
Right. Yeah.
It's somewhere
like
out there.
It's
So
only
pipe
when
dream
you
doesn't matter, right?
succeed in taking out the grid.
Right.
It doesn't exist because there's no cyber war. So there's no ICS malware.
No.
Thank you very much. Come back next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's
the
cyber
impact,
policing action.
the
Or
impact,
like,
the impact of this is probably one of the most valuable. I mean, I want to say, you know, with all the caveats about the horrors that are going on, this is probably one of the most valuable conflicts that we've had in recent memory, both from a war in cyberspace perspective and the role that the internet plays in conflict in general, right? It has completely upended people's, you know, their vision for how things are going. Like, you know, there's like a major in cybercom going, why aren't these civilians staying in their lane, right? and all these people with, like I don't know what sarcophagus the norms and cyber diplomacy people are hiding in, but the mental gymnastics that they're going to have to carry out
They're carrying them out.
It's just you know, this is you stated these principles, right? But when it comes down to it, the only people that matter are the people you like. You want the principles for the people you like. Russia, the state, is the aggressor here. They're the bad guys. They're the baddies. That's clear. But every non-combatant that's being hammered by the IT army and whatever randos of the internet are doing their part for truth, justice in the Ukrainian way, I don't see any fingers being pointed at those folks. You have some principles, have the intestinal fortitude to stand up for them regardless. Or please don't expect me to take you seriously.
Or adapt the principles. Like, I think the principles, I think the real issue here is somebody sat down and made up a game of Risk with their own little rule book. And then, you know, they're like, why doesn't war work the way my tabletop exercise was supposed to go? Like,
the thing is, they've had decades of it, right? So like they sat down in like 2000 and they're like, what is cyber war going to look like? And they came up with cyber risk or whatever. And they ran all these scenarios and they like started doing it. And they've got so invested in developing like tactics and theory and strategies based on what they have decided it looks like, that when something actually shows up and it doesn't look like that, they are not only wrong-footed, but they have to either say, what we're seeing is not war, because war looks like Risk. You know, like I know what war looks like. I wrote the book, and if it's not Risk, it's not war. That's, sorry, like those are the rules.
So
I
let's
think they say
separate
it's
a
not
couple
war.
of things here, right? So the first one is the somewhat rightful accusation that Mike made about, hey, listen, it's only it's only illegal and bad when it's somebody that we don't like. There's some truth to that, right? But I think it's fair to say that since Ukraine was attacked, right, they're kind of the victim, and so it's kind of a right of self-defense sort of thing, and that's kind of the lens to color that through.
That's fair, but that does not extend to, say, a teenager in New York City hacking the shit out of Russia.
Absolutely agreed, right? And I'm the first one to say that, you know, the profession of arms is a profession, right? And they should let professionals do it.
Come on.
It's arguable how professional they are. I'm
Come
not sitting in.
on.
So-
Oh,
so you have-
real dudes over here with your
Let me go
military
back to let me go back to
doctrines.
something else. I'm going to make a lot more friends here at Cybercom and CNMF to talk about, you know, the thing that nobody likes to talk about, which is that, you know, the definition of warfare by DoD leadership is led by, you know, people that have drank the Kool-Aid and can't think outside of doctrine and think that warfare is still all about kinetic effects and don't understand kinetic effects to non-kinetic attacks, right? It's amazing. You go watch the generals and the colonels and the admirals speak at Congress, right? And when they're asking for funding, it's all about the cyber threat and the space threat, right? When they go and talk about the great things that they're doing, right? It's all about, you know, $10 billion joint strike fighters and aircraft carriers, right? So let's kind of put that aside for a minute.
But how much of that is filtering the fact that like no one can talk about the cybers, right? Like no one is allowed to ever mention the cybers outside of the lead sarcophagus under Notre Dame, you know, where the policy people and the actual military people doing cyber live, right?
Okay, no, so, you know, fair, right? We don't talk about our operations, but we certainly could talk about, you know, adversaries' operations, right? Again, I hate to bring up this example, but it's the best example we got. The fact that we had a NATO partner have national critical infrastructure attacked when they were in a non-combatant status, and there wasn't even a discussion about Article 5, shows me that they just ignore, you know, non-kinetic threats, even when they have a kinetic effect. And what I'm talking about, for those of you that haven't been following along, is the VIASat hack that resulted in power generating windmills in Germany going offline, right? President's Policy Directive 21 says that power generation, right, electric power generation is national critical infrastructure. I realize that's a US construct, not necessarily applicable to NATO, but the fact that there wasn't even a discussion.
Here's the thing, though. Germany's addressing that by just buying more gas from Russia to make up for what they lost with the windmills going out. So it works out okay. Like I don't really see what the problem is. I don't know where you're coming from on this one.
I'm not feeding the troll.
Well, we've discussed it a couple of times now, right? And I mentioned it in my talks about acid rain, because it was like, yeah, I'm not going to be the one to stoke all this Article 5 nonsense, but I do want to point out that it is nonsense in the sense of like, we will invoke, and I say we, the royal we, will invoke this when we feel like it. It is not a matter, exactly, like it's not a matter of like, we're going to have our hand forced. Like we've learned it's not going to be the like set of dominoes of like, well, this happened in Germany, so now, yeah,
but I
now
have to.
NATO has to, and now we have to, and like, oh, you know, we're just kind of getting beyond
that, right? You don't want to have this uncontrolled escalation. But I'm not even aware of a strongly worded email or letter or demarche being sent.
This is the thing, is like, I think what you're getting at is
a strongly worded email.
A strongly worded email. I've seen more hatred comment like Twitter for blocking tweets. Right? Than knocking national critical power structure offline in a non-combatant nation.
Like
I've seen Yelp reviews that were more stern.
That it happened, right? Like someone needs to say, like, officially, we see this. That's not okay. Even though, like, you know, it's not going to lead to anything, but just ignoring it.
There's some NATO weirdness there, and you know, there's some NATO weirdness there.
Look, what you need is you need NATO to go like, Russia, I'm going to count to 3. Right? That's what we're looking for. Not even like a real threat, just like.
I don't think they even want to do that. I mean, I think they know that Russia's going to keep pushing buttons, and it was the line in the sand argument that we always had about ICS, right? Like if we say this is the line, they're going to put their toe right over it, and then again and again and again. But the truth is that like we're just balls out at this point, right? Like forget VIASat, like In Destroyer comes back. in controller pipe dream is somehow caught in staging, which is its own interesting conversation. But like,
also done by we.
oh, it was
Jack,
definitely
were you part of the
we.
we that caught that?
I'd like to think that having
You were as much a part of the we as anyone else.
having paid a meager amount of what must have gone into that we to discover it, I do like to think that we are part of that royal we. No, but the whole point is, right, like we are seeing the full on capabilities, and they were deployed in Ukraine. We didn't get to see pipe dream and controller deployed where it was supposed to go, but I think there's a reason why we are seeing what I suspect is an unprecedented sharing with the private sector of unused capability, lining up with she who must not be named's warning at the and Neuberger's warning at the White House about ICS stuff. They're all out. They're balls out. We're not seeing any kind, like, what are they holding back at this point? If you're going to go after like LNG facilities and power generation somewhere in the West, we're all out. Like, what's the limitation at this point?
And so that's the question, right? So the argument I've heard for 2 decades, the argument about that, well, if you define a red line, then they're just going to toe up to it and say they haven't crossed. Okay, well, that's fine. And if you find that that's still not something you're comfortable with, you go, okay, that's fine. We're now redefining the red line, right? What you can't do is go, well, if we define the red line, it'll toe up to it. So we're just not going to define anything. You just can't do that.
The counter is, if you don't define it, then they don't toe up to it. They just walk wherever the fuck they want.
Right.
Well, I think in cyber, they don't toe up to it, right? In cyber, when you say this is the red line, they definitely put a toe over it. And then it goes to show how fucking toothless we are, that like, we're just like, oh, well, you cross this one red line, but like the next red line, definitely don't go up to that one, right? And
all right, let me throw in like a counter argument. I think they're deterred. Straight up, the Russians are scared. That's why we haven't seen a bunch of cyber attacks. They're scared. They released that thing last week where they're like, why won't you agree to a treaty on cyber with us? Maybe they're scared.
Are you still drunk?
So Katie just put
I think he's like super hungover. I think all those
Like,
Dragos drinks. I think Dragos was feeding him like engine cleaner or something.
But I mean, the other option here is that they're doing a bunch of stuff we're not seeing. And as I saw this great talk in S4, the conference that was here in Miami Beach, great conference, by the way. This week, I saw a great talk, and someone was like, look, the only reason we heard about the VIASat hack was because it hit the German stuff. Because without those windmills going down, it would never have been in the news. It would never have been public. We know the vendor sort of, I'm not going to say lied, but like dissembled a little bit about their release. So as all vendors do, right? Like that is like your PR team is not there to properly communicate the risk to your clients. Your PR team is there, and this is industry wide. I'm not calling them out. So I guess what I'm saying is there's probably a crap ton of stuff happening right now. That Turla team is probably working 24/7. And I'm calling out Turla just to make JAGs pained, right? You see that face? But I still think it is them, because if I think awesome satellite stuff, I just think Turla. It's the branding. It's good.
I don't think it was them in that case. I do think Turla's around, but I don't think that it's them in that particular case.
Imagine how frustrating it must be if you're Turla to be hitting the Ukrainians as hard as you can, and it's having no appreciable effect in terms of their warfighting capability.
Well,
Right.
but that has to do, that's the typical like intelligence never gets to the right places, or people see it and ignore it, right? Because like Turla is a proper espionage group, right? They are collecting information, they're pushing it to the right places, and then if some Russian general says, well, who gives a fuck, and like keeps rolling in the wrong direction, I'm sure they're used to that after 25 years of Russian bureaucracy. But like in this case, what we're seeing is, it seems, primarily Sandworm doing sandwormy things, and I don't think we should be surprised. But like I don't think we're appreciating the cumulative effect of like the amount of activity that we're seeing staged, the amount of activity that's actually out there. Like INCONTROLLER / pipe dream is an important moment, and I think we're at risk of ignoring it because we don't have the last mile of the story, which is where were they planning to put this fucking thing? Because if it was supposed to be some liquid natural gas facility in the West Coast in America, and we had waited until they actually positioned it, we should be having an incredibly, like a very different conversation. And the only reason we're not is that some royal we somewhere pulled it off before it was placed where it was supposed to be placed and gave it to the private sector.
So
here's
a couple
the
of
thing.
things.
It's like Russia doesn't do like if Russia is going to do a thing, they're not going to do one thing and let it go. Like if Russia is going to attack NATO, they're going to do like a swarm. They're going to do a whole bunch of NATO, not like
Hold on.
one.
So Putin, Putin's tactic is not just that. Putin's tactic is I'm going to do something over here and pay no attention to what the other hand is doing, right? So back to JAG's point, there's a couple of things. First of all, we know about the VIASat thing because it was in Germany and there was, a physical manifestation that people noticed. If it had been in Germany and there was not a physical manifestation, we probably wouldn't have heard about it because the intelligence community would not have shared it, right? Going back to the other thing about, why are the Russians holding back, or are the Russians holding back? I think they're absolutely holding back. I think they're holding back not because they're afraid. I think they're holding back because if they don't, there's no incentive for us to hold back, right? If they launch wide scale attacks, it's like, well, we survived that. The only thing they got left is nukes, and that's not going to work out well for anybody. So we may as well let NATO go in there with a military kinetic action, right? So I think Russia for the most part is happy with kind of this détente where they'd be happier if we weren't sending kinetic weapons to Ukraine, but we're not involved, right? We don't have large amounts of troops on the ground. We're not launching, carrier air wings. By the way, I still love the fact that Ukraine lost their flagship in a land war to a country with no navy. I just
Russia,
Navy
did.
guy. I'm sorry, Russia did. I just have to say that that's awesome.
All right. So
I love that we've just
Russian
glossed
navies,
over the Moscow.
Ukraine probably only had a tangential involvement in that sinking. I mean, the Russian Navy has got a pretty strong history of losing their stuff on their own. But
so none of these things are fun if everybody agrees with each other. So let me throw this out there.
I don't agree with any of you.
I'm gonna conflate three things that were just brought up. Dave's point.
there is no I in we.
JAG's earlier point and the escalation piece or the detente piece from Pablo. Look, there's no Great Firewall of America, right? We were just talking before about like all we know. If the best report in the world is a slice of the pie, right? Putin can't lose, right? Or he certainly doesn't want to lose. So, fusing atoms is really the only step left, right? Except cyber stuff, right? So let me put forth the proposition that we don't have any idea of what may be going on because we don't. It's your network, it's my network, it's a corporate network, it's the government network, and no, there's no cyber police here. We don't know. We're only looking at slices of the pie, and not to make them out to be a Bond villain boogeyman, but there could be all sorts of stuff waiting in the wings, and it's the one thing that they have left to use before spreading fallout across the Caucasus.
Right. I mean, I'm with you there, Mike, in the sense that like I think our conversations, because we make fun of like the cyber war, whatever thing, I think we end up swerving into discussing it on their terms. I mean, what we know of what cyber is actually going to play in all of this is it's not this grand equalizer. It's not this continual support unit alone. It's this long arm of, below threshold effects where you get to kind of beat people, just why are you smacking yourself like across the planet and just fuck with things just a little bit. And that's what we're going to see with the truth is that Russia right now, their biggest concern, if they have any brain cells left, is a matter of economics. How long can this go on before you are either a vassal state of China or just fucking eating your own children, right? Like there's really not that many options at that point. It's not, if we continue to prop up, like help the Ukrainians, give them weapons, give them support, and this takes longer, it takes another month, 2 months, 3 months, what is Russia going to be reduced to? So cyber here isn't about shock and awe or any of that bullshit. If anything, it doesn't really matter a whole lot to the Ukrainian conflict as anything other than like, the same way the drones and other things are going to play their own parts. It's about what's going to happen with how they use it to harass Western Europe and harass the United States into like continuing the conflict, pissing us off, hopefully pushing us to feel a little deterred, but not enough, as Mike was saying, where, we suddenly decide to carpet bomb Moscow, right? Like, where is that?
Right. So I think like one of the things that you're getting at is that the like the cyber that we're going to see is going to be like not exactly a sideshow, but it's just going to be a thing that's useful to the military in a tactical sense. Like we're not going to see big strategic cyber stuff, except potentially at some point Russia will try and raise the costs of the coalition, right? Because right now, in a parallel to Vietnam, Ukraine's industrial capacity is not in Ukraine, right? It's in America, it's in Germany, it's in France, and so on. You cannot bomb it, right? Like your strategic bombing capability is not going to do you any good, because in order to do that, you have to use like nukes. You can't wipe out all of the factories in Ukraine and stop them getting new weapons, because all they need is like a road and a railway and they'll still get stuff. So
if you look at Mariupol, they've even decided to just not even try with the factories.
Right.
So can I just throw something out there? Because we keep saying that there was, no large scale strategic effect with cyber. Am I the only one that's thinking that one of the first actions that happened took out the primary command and control for Ukraine? Is that not?
That was,
exactly the strategic effect that cyber always throws out in Hollywood.
No, it was fantastic.
Look, it was brilliant. They took an airport, right? They were able to fly into the middle of Ukraine and land people in helicopters, like dozens of them, right next to Kyiv. And that was only possible because cyber had wiped out not only the command and control, but also all of the air defense capability at that point in time. So
but look, Greg, if you succeed, it was strategic. If you fail, it was tactical. Is that not the rule?
But they failed ultimately. So I think what we can say is it was a strategic tactical failure at the operational level.
I do not think those words mean what you think they mean. But the point is, right? Like, so I get really frustrated when I keep hearing about, well, there's no strategic cyber, there's no cyber. Listen, the US has tried to win wars with air power alone since World War II. It's never happened. Nobody's going to argue that air power isn't important, right? I don't understand why we lose our minds and fail to look at history, right? Or see, we say cyber is a domain of warfare like air and water and land, and then we fail to treat it as such.
Yeah.
Right?
So, well, speaking of which,
there's two interesting things to bring up there. One of them is it's a domain of warfare tied into kinetic warfare. The taking out the command and control, taking out the air defenses, these sorts of things. But the other thing is, on its own terms, it's a domain of warfare that needs to be treated differently. So there's the Jeff Bezos thing of like, people asked him, how are you going to do book signings at Amazon? And he's like, we won't. Like, that's the thing you can only do in a physical store. We're going to do something that fits with,
and that,
this
I swear to God,
is
100% true. And no one looked at the North Korea versus Sony Pictures thing at the time and was like, okay, well, I guess that's the last time North Korea is in an American movie, but that's what you should have done, right? Like, cyber does work for coercion.
I think Seth Rogen will get high one of these days and give us something good, like some good Kim Jong-un. You know, maybe they'll bring the Ayatollah into it, and we'll figure something out. Like, I don't think it's all done. It's just, you know, it's played out, right? Like, we in 2014 we taught Americans that North Korea existed with this stoner comedy, and then, you know, you don't want to push it too hard. Like, give them 10 years and we'll do it again.
Well, this ahistorical commentary about yesterday about, you know, how bad people are for targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. Do they not teach World War II Army Air Corps history at the Air Force Academy? Because there's a town called Dresden, along with a whole bunch of other places that was part of the war. We were going to bomb the crap out of these people.
Well, shit, you just brought up the thing we weren't going to talk about.
Oh, shit.
Don't mention the war.
No, we like in the pre-call before, because like, I mean, we all saw Rob at S4, like Dave and I did, and like, you know, I consider Rob a friend. I think we've just kind of been skirting around this sort of, I don't think that it was an off-the-cuff comment, but I think it was an ill-advised comment. But I think it goes to show kind of the situation that we're in, where it's like there's how we're misjudging cyber effects in the whole war, Ukraine, whatever thing. Then there's also how we're mistallying our current situation when it comes to defense, which is like, if you look at Rob's statement, there's this bizarre conflict where you're saying, we caught 1 in 7. Do better, Russia. And you're like, that's a fucking fluke. That's a goddamn miracle. There's literally some ginormous, you know, human, SIGINT, whatever machinery somewhere that blessed you with a finding before it was too late. And you're looking at the Russians and going, yeah, fucking try harder. And at the same time, it's like,
so here's where I want to get everyone to stick a knife in the sand on a prediction. Has there been something big here in the States that the Russians have done that we haven't heard about yet?
of course. What do we define as big? What are we talking like ICSE, or are we talking
Is there like a
just
SolarWinds V2 is what you're saying? Like,
But I would say sort of
Yeah.
like
SolarWinds,
perhaps
we haven't noticed yet.
ICSE related to like the Ukraine war, for example. Like, for example, if SpaceX turns out to have been hit, that would qualify. Has that happened?
So can I caveat my response?
Yeah, because it's a talk show.
like
I
10
think
asterisks? Yeah.
I think it has absolutely happened. I think that there's been pre-staging of capabilities. And I think that happened way before Ukraine. So do I think it's happened? Yeah, you know, I mean, that's the way nation states work. That's the way espionage works, right? You pre-place capabilities for when you need them. And I think that happened before the Ukraine. Now, did Ukraine kind of ramp things up, right, in preparation for that? Yeah, possibly. Maybe. Do I have any evidence of that? No, but it absolutely makes sense.
I'm going to take that as a no.
No. Look, you do these ICS attacks for effect, right? Like it would be like saying, has there been significant wiper activity in the US that we haven't, heard about? And you're like, but the whole point is to hear about.
No,
right?
I don't think you're right there, because
how fucking dare you? Oh, good. He muted. I don't know what you just said.
You muted him for disagreeing with you.
Yeah, exactly. I muted you for
I'm sorry, what was that, Dave? Couldn't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, boom. Well, I guess you're wrong.
Sad. No, I'm sad. No, I think that but if you try and either you get caught or fail, that still counts. And also, you already said on stage that we never would have heard of VIASat had it not been for collateral damage.
Right, but the issue there is Ukraine.
Why would they do ICS against the US? Right, like let's assume that Russia is not.
Why would they invade Ukraine?
Throwing poo everywhere,
yeah.
Right? Like they have a reason that they will do a thing that they've got.
Because Greg, if I read your own stuff, you say that cyber is global. It is a global space. I'm just quoting you at this point.
the thing is, they would choose things that help them achieve their aims. So for example, they will probably go after oil prices, not ICS, right? If you take out the electrical grid, it comes back up. But if you make oil more expensive, people get fucking angry and they don't like what the government is doing.
I just
That
don't understand,
changes
like,
name.
this prompt that you just put up, Dave, is kind of complicated in the sense of like, we are talking about things that cause effects. And like, so we're either talking about like a cover up in the sense of like, bro, it was the Russians that did Flint, Michigan. It wasn't us, right? Like we would never let our people drink lead for 5 years, right? Like that, or, and like Pablo drops out. Yeah, it was
if you
that,
disagree,
or like,
leave.
yeah. You know, I really don't think that, I don't think that that's how it ends up playing out, but at the same time, we have to understand cyber that is for effects and cyber that is default discrete. And most cyber operations, like most espionage is going to be default discrete.
All right.
But when you're talking about wipers and ICS stuff, the whole point is to have an effect, right? Like unless we're talking about something that's like, I think there's a sort of edge case that we never want to talk about, which is just like data manipulation, right? Like if you go into like high frequency trading and start fucking with the algos and then let them all go to shit, interesting, right? But that's not the kind of scenarios that's not the kind of subtle scenario we're talking about here. We're talking about,
if
like,
you want to deter United States industry from contributing to the war effort, you can deter them the same way you can deter them from publishing movies.
I don't know, man.
It's
We're
a
a bunch
little
of
bit more
fucking
complicated
cowboys.
because
You're not deterring us from shit, right? Like there's definitely a wish a motherfucker would attitude in the United States, right? Like if you really pushed people in the US, it's easier to have resolve than it is if you just like, you know, just gradually fuck with them.
So here's the thing, like one of the problems with strategic bombing is it makes people come together and unite against a common enemy through like a shared experience. And that is what things like an ICS attack are going to do, because people will go like, remember the time when the lights went out for 8 hours and, you know, like we all came together and there were like people playing the radio from their cars and we had the barbecue and like, fuck Russia, we're not going to like sit back and let them push us around like this. Like that's a really bad idea for Russia. On the other hand, if they attack, I don't know, like African ports that oil tankers have to stop at and delay oil tankers, which therefore leads to a crunch in the US, which leads to higher gas prices. That's not a thing that people will unite about. That's a thing that people will get pissed off at the government for not fixing, because you won't be able to explain that Russia has done this through like 3 levels of indirection. Like you won't be able, it's a second order effect, blame Russia. It's not going to make sense. They're just going to go like, why am I paying more at the gas? They're like,
at that point, you're talking about the kind of Bond villain-esque strategic thinking that that almost never works the way you expect it to. And it's mostly like movie or Intel LARP fodder where people, you know, sit around and go, oh my God, if they just knew that if they hit these 2 ports, we like our gas prices would pass $10. Like, that's a great plot for a movie. The world doesn't work that way. Moreover, like look at what happened at the beginning of the Ukraine conflict. Like the unthinkable things immediately were lined up. They're like, hey, Maduro, how's it going, bro? Like bring all that Venezuelan oil right back. You're like, well, who had that in their bingo card, right? So like it just, the world doesn't quite work in those like easy chess move type thinking. And that's why like cyber is more like a gadfly in this situation. It's like, can I just kind of keep annoyingly slapping you in the face when it comes to like the distance stuff, right? Can I like either with Pipe Dream, like, are we talking about them blowing up liquid natural gas facilities, or are we talking about like a shutdown, right? Like what kind of kinetic effects are we going for here? Because a shutdown is like annoying and like, wow, like some shit just went down. We should have a conversation. We should take some pause. If you're talking about like, you know, blowing up a liquid natural gas facility, like this is much more, you know, Die Hard 4 shit, right?
well, like the thing is like, one of the things that's useful about cyber is it's reversible, generally speaking. Even if you're doing a wiper, it's a thing that is reversible. So like in terms of a violent act, it can be dialed up and down. You can adjust how much you're doing and you can do less of it. So that's not the same with blowing up a place, because you could only sort of blow it up so much, right? And you can't like blow it up less. So yeah, like I don't know, while I agree that the strategic like pinpoint pricks that like take out and end up causing like massive changes, like as a chessboard thing, that's not realistic. But using cyber in a way that causes that is realistic. And that is the better approach in terms of if you want to cause coalition costs, that's the sort of thing that you need to target, not the grid, because the grid is not going to be effective in raising costs. It's going to be effective in uniting people. And
like this is where we need to kind of re-steer the conversation, because it's like we're not talking. No, because we're not talking about the hypothetical of what they might do. We're talking about the reality of what they were preparing to do. So if what we're saying is it's smarter for you to go try to tactically raise costs on NATO to supply like the Ukrainians, like we're like, okay, well, that's a smart strategy. That's not what they were doing. So like clearly they have a different strategy, right? So like, and at the same time, like there's a conversation in the chat with our sponsor, Kim Setter is here. There's a conversation.
While you bring that up, I'd like to take a moment to mention the Substack run by Kim Zetter, a wonderful resource that is available for everyone. You should sign up at Google
Google Kim Setter thing. Yeah, no, I mean she's our sponsor. It's NordVPN and Kim Setter Substack. No, but okay, again, right? Like the reality of the strategy was to go after that. That kind of effect. When they were going to use it, how they were going to use it, I think we could read the tea leaves in the sense of the US government, not Dragos, the US government decided that it was worth taking something that I'm sure they would consider ultra strap whatever you want classified, and hand it to two private sector companies and say, do something with this shit. Like, I think that in itself being this kind of groundbreaking change suggests that they were aware of something, some use.
Border intelligence strategy so far with this war has been make it public. So it fits in with the approach that's been taken in terms of using public exposure to burn Russian capabilities or burn Russian planning. So contextually, it makes sense. It might not be a sea change that we can expect in future, is what I'm
suggesting. So if we were going to have a suggestion for the US government, AKA for CISA, who were all at S4, which I thought was really cool.
A lot of opportunities available. We have another 40 weeks in the year.
They should be sponsoring this podcast as well.
I don't think they're going to do that. Every other podcast, we're like, you guys are fucking up in this way.
But that's valuable information. I would say that like it's one thing when you are in a state of emergency and you're handing things to the public for analysis, that can be inefficient. Sometimes it's good to drop like a massively deeply technical analytical product on the world to set the direction, if that makes sense. Which is kind of what like the original APT-1 report was.
I don't know.
Do you think that's a bad idea? You think it's terrible? You're like, no, I do that. Leave me alone.
No. It's not about any of that. It's not about any of that. But like you started this by saying like advice for CISA. Like I think it was kind of unfair to go advice for the US government and then say advice for CISA, because like those are two
what they need is a thing above shields up. So they need like shields higher. I think that's shields on shields up would be like shields normal.
Shields like stonks only go up, right? Like, and like it was just brought up by Dale. Dale like was interviewing Jen Easterly, and he's like, "When do the shields go down?" And like there was a lot of sniggering in the crowd, but it's like she's like, "Well, no, they don't come down, but like they'll go to normal." And I'm like, I'm not a fucking Trekkie, but I'm pretty sure shields don't go normal, right? Shields go up or down. and I think it goes to show kind of how bad the analogy itself is, right? Like, I think we would have been better off with like something that's being suggested in the chat of like using Die Hard movies as our DEFCON levels than we would like just shields up and then shields up higher and then shields way up and then ultra shields and then bring new shields. Like, it's just shields, because it's insulting. Like, there's those people sitting in that crowd and like ICS land and S4, they're like, we weren't like arbitrarily choosing not to defend ourselves before CISA came to tell us to defend ourselves a little harder, right?
Like, yeah, like which shields up measure are you supposed to stop doing if the shields go down, right? Like, what, like, do you turn off 2FA because now it's just too much of a hassle? Like, is that the recommendation? Do I understand this correctly? Because I'm not getting it. You know, like, wouldn't it be like just take the security things you were going to do at some point in time and kind of move that forward to now, like accelerate your security deployment? So maybe it's
someone in the chat
like 0 to 60 faster.
Yeah, I'm glad someone in the chat is talking about, like, you know, if we had given, this is what happens when you give shit to Trekkies. If you had Star Wars folks on this, they would have known how to handle the situation a bit better. We know the Star Wars universe sucks. We don't idealize it. It's all bounty hunters and like chosen people going bad and turning into Twitter rock stars. And like, you know, your midichlorian count suddenly enabling you to kill children, right? Like, that's the real cybers. It's not this idealized bullshit of like colonizing the universe with English speaking.
The real cyber is that the fonts, Times New Roman and Arial, the licenses have been revoked for Russia. That is cyber war.
It's Comic Sans from here on out.
They're going to lose, and they're 3 months faster this way.
Yeah.
All right,
So take the orders seriously.
I want to drive us in a little circle here, like a little backwards time loop, and ask what you felt was wrong with the O-Day reports, because something definitely glaringly struck out at me, which was O-Day does not come from government. Where are the hackers?
This pissed me the fuck off. There's the, you know, O-Day used to be a thing for governments, but now criminals are starting to use it. Like, motherfucker.
I'm not sure who that guy talked to, but I'm sure they're probably 22.
If you have any history in this business, you will know it is really the other way around, right? Like,
right.
And even if you look into industry right now, if you look at like the bug bounty market, it's humongous and it's teenagers, right? Like, and they're finding good O-Day and then they sell them. That's the thing. You can't both be annoyed at the supply chain of like people selling bugs and want to put export control around so people don't sell bugs, and then turn around and be like, oh, but it's all governments. Like, fine. Do they think these things have never been used?
I'm assuming that before he wrote that, wherever he ate lunch, they ran out of salmon. So that's well.
We're not going. We already pissed off Rob Lee in this talk. We're not also going into the CISA advisorship.
I mean, I just you see this. I know I'm an old man, and I know I have this unnerving fascination with research and history, but like you can't pick up the magazine article from 2 years ago and go, this is where history starts and where I'm going to write this thing, because people who don't know any better are going to take that seriously. You have a certain amount of responsibility to do the homework, right? I'm not saying you have to do a 30-year literature review and all that, but come
25.
On, make an effort, right? Make an effort. Talk to somebody who has been doing this for any length of time, and to bounce this off. It's why are we not advancing? Well, apparently the historical loop that we're on is like 18 months long.
Well, Mike, I mean, to be fair, this isn't the worst example of that, right? Like, to be fair to whomever wrote the Mandiant report and the Google report or whatever, like, I think folks are just kind of marveling at like, the marveling is essentially, oh my God, so many O-Days, right? Like 2021 was an explosion of fucking O-Days. Are we getting better at catching them, or are there more of them? I would argue that it's probably that we're getting better at catching them, and we still don't know how many of them are really out there. But I don't, to address your point exactly about like the history bit, that issue is much bigger than this fucking report. Like it's what we started this conversation with, and honestly what the snark has been about for the past like 2 months, which is there are people out there who inform much broader swaths of people than we do, because they're writing on the New York Times, Washington Post, all this bullshit, and talking to DC, decision makers who are paid to study the cybers, whom are unaware of the history of stuff that actually has happened, how did it happen, and where did it go wrong, right? Like, just seems to be like a sort of pet
Unlike Kim Zetter.
Well,
who
right. Like,
has
why
one-
isn't Kim Setter our go-to? Like, why the fuck are we having these dumbass panels with a bunch of like think tank idiots who can't be bothered to read any real reports? And those people are getting a ton of mileage, but I don't see like Kim Setter getting to like come out and be like, well, actually, like, this is how this shit actually goes. Like, what is happening here?
Like, what, I mean, John Markov's still working, right? I mean, he's not in a sarcophagus under Notre Dame.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
The policy sarcophagus under Notre Dame has not been opened. We don't know which cyber policy people are in this sarcophagus, but they needed to be ensconced in lead.
It's, I mean, and not to get off my lawn mode, but like, how much of this is driven by? I mean, there are plenty of people here. I don't count myself among them, but there are plenty of people who've been doing this for a long time, who have the respect and the knowledge of the community and the knowledge, or at least a section of the community. And then we have, people who have their 15 minutes. And it's like, oh, let's pile on these. We're going to extend this 15 minutes to 45. And they don't have I'm not saying they don't have the wherewithal, but they just don't have the sense of history and the broader context. It's not a popularity. If this is serious, if this is a serious discipline, if this is a serious problem for war or society or whatever,
the domain of war,
we should not be taking, the opinions. It's like actors weighing in on geopolitical thing. It's like, they're a human being. They get to have an opinion, but it's just not one that should be informing, statecraft.
I have a strong opinion on this topic, and I do think that it's our fault in the US. It's our fault not in the private sector. Oh my God, Silas looking fantastic.
so anyway, that's all we have time for.
Yeah, and good night. No,
Yes.
no, I think it's our fault in the not in the private sector. It's our fault in the US government, because we have effectively gagged the people who actually know what the fuck they're talking about from ever expressing an informed opinion in an open forum. Right? Like, you're going to end up getting cartwrighted if you come out and say, well, this is what we did back in 2012, and this is how it worked, and this is why we did it, and here was our rationale. And we decided that, like, yes, we could shut down all of this country, but instead we decided that if we went about it in this, that, and the other way, that was responsible usage of cyber. Like, no US government or military person is empowered to come out and say, these are the lessons we learned. This is how we went about it. This is why we decided to do X, Y, and Z. And that has created this vacuum of authority that is being filled by idiots in think tanks, people who just get to write for the Atlantic Council, because I think they just like raffle those spaces off to folks, like, and op-eds. And we're in this loop where there's no authority. Everyone gets to have an opinion. That's where I feel it falls. Like, I think that we're missing that authoritative track in the middle.
I think one problem with history is when it's happening, you don't realize it's important. And cyber is still really young. And when it was developing, we didn't realize it was going to be a big deal necessarily. And I don't know that we recorded the history of like, how did the United States and its allies develop a cyber capability, and what were the lessons learned, right? Like, you were too busy learning lessons, well, probably. So I don't know if that has been.
Those pink headphones are really,
yeah,
just like.
Yeah.
I'll actually argue that we haven't even still figured out how to preserve the history of like what's going on. Like
I think Mike has an opinion on this one.
Oh.
What's that? Anything to say about preserving history and
Oh, yeah.
cataloging? Or?
Step one, gather up all the papers, right? That's which is right. There's no, if you want to be, you've heard this before. If you want to be a physicist, you can look up all the physics, right? And you can find
you get all of the matter
slice
on
of
one
things that you want
Step
to do.
one.
Right? You can't do that. This stuff is spread out everywhere. It is, I mean, I think I'm up to 30,000 just purely academic pieces. I haven't even barely scraped by on all the conference sites and all that sort of stuff. But there's just so much, look at container breakouts, right? All right, there's 78 papers on container breakouts. Do we need another paper on container breakouts? No, probably not, right? Right. Or if you're going to write about some other topic, how far back does this go? 1988 was the first paper on that, right? Prior art, all the things that would make this a science, right? Or a more serious discipline. We just don't. It's a rando in his home office putting these things together because it's one, I'm not popular and I'm not pretty and I don't eat fish, but it's the step you need to take to advance things to the point where we want them to be, right? Where we for those of us who've been doing this for a while, we thought we'd be here by now, right? but we're not. So are we there yet? No. Stop saying
but
that.
it's sort of the first step, right? Because
it is the first step.
Like the second step would be doing analytical techniques on them.
Yep.
And if we even just look at like
What, every time he goes to say something substantive, it just cuts out. I love it. If you just look at
the timing of it, that makes
perfect.
it so sweet.
I don't know who's gotten control of his headset, but it's beautiful.
Beautiful sense of irony.
You want to try again, Dave? If you look at the what now? Nope, still not. You don't like. Maybe we can dub him. If you.
So I was like, okay, guys, I want to drink a lot. I'm a good drinker.
Yeah. But dude. So Silas, what's up with you, man?
It's Friday. Just happy
It
to
is?
talk about cyber.
Talk about them cyber. Well, I think that the real question here is with our current crowd and the people in the chat, we're at 5-minute mark unless we plan to run long. So we need some.
I can't. I've got a thing at the half hour. So
Okay.
I mean, could run long. Dave, do you have an opinion on this?
Dave, thoughts? No, Dave has no thoughts. That's perfect.
Dave's got nothing to say. That's a first.
I was hanging out with Dave the other day, and he was expressing his love for Kaspersky and Huawei, and just telling me how much he really appreciates their presence in the space. He hopes they thrive and have great businesses here in the West. And I mean, I'm glad he's come full circle.
Talking
right?
about that freelance gig that he's been doing for Huawei, where he's just giving them sort of background advice, and they pay him in cash. And that's been going really well for him. And
Wait,
bravo,
Dave,
sir.
Is that how I got this Huawei stylus? Was this the one?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Can we have Kim Setter next week? Kim is in the thing in the chat.
Kim, would you like to join us next week?
As our sponsor, can we have Kim on the chat for next week? We will actually organize this and tell people in advance. We want Kim.
Tell them in advance, at least 30 minutes early. Almost.
In my defense, Silas's tweet bot is broken, so I think it's entirely his.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
And
totally
without his tweet bot, we do not have access to Twitter.
You both have a login.
Yeah.
Are we really good? So okay, we talk about shields up. We talk like no one cares about the North Koreans doing North Korean things, but like, what is Charlie Miller seems to be goading all of us on Twitter with this O-Day thing, where he's like, well, why aren't people finding US O-Days? Like they're not out there, or they can't be found. And I'm like, where's option C, where like everyone finds them and nobody wants to talk about them? Like, am I the only one?
The US does such good social engineering that they've put their entire arsenal on ice. They're just sitting there going like, look, everyone clicks everything. It is literally pointless developing bugs when you could just send a zip file that says like, please run me, and they do. So
Absolutely true, but you know, in the sense that like the U.S., some parts of the U.S.
no one
have
wants to see
actually,
your pussy. Put that away. This is a family show.
in the sense that the U.S., like the U.S. is literally, some parts of the U.S. have literally redefined the physics of the space, right? Like quantum from NSA. Yeah, you don't need O-Day. Like we literally have reshaped what the physics of cyber look like so that we have an advantage. But we do find US O-Day, we do find Five Eyes O-Day. You do trip over an azimuth here and there. And like, no one wants to talk about it, right? Like all the shit that Google has been quietly getting over there, like, why did you suddenly patch 11 zero days that are probably being used for like counterterrorism or whatever? That, you know, that's just, nobody wants to have the conversation, but it's there. And I just like, I want to kind of put a pin on that because I don't know if Charlie's being disingenuous and trying to get us to talk about it, or I'm afraid that like this conversation is actually happening.
I think he's literally just trying to goad you to saying, yes, we do not reveal US capabilities because it's bad for business. And we also have a whole bunch of ex-military, ex-fucking intel people, and they've all got a real fucking patriot thing going on, and they refuse to accept. Like, it's just, there's a cultural reason, and there's a, there's a business reason, and there's a just general reason of like, we don't, you know, piss in the tent of our own side. It's all like, it's entirely fair. That's a reasonable position to take. I
don't know that it's a reasonable position to take. I don't know that that's a reasonable.
Why is security the thing that they stop, right? Why is the security the thing that they rally around the flag? Whereas anything else, we don't want to develop algorithms that, you know, to help border patrol. We don't want to develop algorithms or technology that supports drones. We don't, you know, we're going to protest this. You know, we're going to do a double Irish, whatever. Which I know this is a family show. I'm sorry, but we're going to do.
I've been cursing for like 7 weeks straight.
Shenanigans to get out of taxes and all that sort of stuff. But it's this little thing that we're not going to do.
There is that whole like cowboy patriot bullshit of like the revolving door between the IC and the threat intel space. But I personally look at it like, it's not that I don't love my country, but if I'm being like authentic and realistic, none of us are US companies. We're global companies. We sell our shit to European nations and the Middle East and Asia. And I think you're bordering on fraud when you go sell your shit in Belgium, but you don't tell them that, you know, I mean, if it's the UK or the US hacking you, bro, like we're just going to turn a blind eye to that. Like that's not right. That's the part where I'm like, I get where you're coming from, but it's ill-advised, right? Like, I don't think you're forgetting what your new role in this space is, and it isn't working inside of the American IC.
Yeah, well, you signed up to be to join this tech accord, and you're supposed to treat everybody equally, and you're supposed to protect everybody equally. Unless the people you don't like, and then then you quietly forget it.
Or even if they're people you like, but they're being attacked by other people you like, right? Like, I do think that there's something fraudulent about it in the sense that like we have a job, we have a part in this ecosystem, and it's not one that we should relax because it's somebody that we like. And that's a part at which, you know, we stop acting the way that we do. And I think even the American intelligence community should be asking us to do more and to do a better job. Because frankly, if I can find your fucking toolkit, I would like to think
any idiot can, is what you're saying.
Any idiot can find, right? Like, no, for real. Like if I know, you know, your latest American Israeli whatever thing, and you're just like, yo, dude, like, please shut the fuck up about it. That doesn't mean that no one else spotted it. Like, I'm not a magician, man. Like, so that's a part at which I think we fail as a counterintelligence function.
Well, there's more to it than that as well, because one of the ways that you improve your security is by failing and finding out what you did wrong, right? Like you need to know that doing it this way is easily detectable by someone who just has like X telemetry on the network, they're going to spot it. And if no one tells you that, and you're not testing for it, you will assume that that's not a thing that you need to worry about. And yeah, like Jags is right. That is a counterintelligence role that needs to be filled. Like someone has to be playing Red Force.
I mean,
You know, like
case
there
in
has to be an
point,
up for.
Brian Bartholomew is in the chat, and case in point, he's talking about sort of the Chinese and APT3. We've seen multiple examples of the Chinese finding US tools, repurposing them and using them in attacks elsewhere. And no, they're not the shadow brokers tools. No, they're not coming from some other leak. They caught them in the wild, the same way that we saw the NSA catching Chinese stuff and repurposing it. So like this notion of like, we're just, you know, we're doing the best job we can do if we just turn a blind eye to our friends, I think is beyond ignorant. It's negligent. And shadow brokers itself was a fantastic example of why that shit doesn't work, right?
Yeah, and I think the thing is there's a way to manage it where like you don't have to be, say, kicking the NSA in the nuts every chance you get, and you don't have to be pretending that you can't do it either. Like there's a middle ground where you could have a way of not so much deconflicting as just like getting a 90 days notice, for example, would probably be fine. Something where you could say like, hey guys, here's a thing we've discovered. We believe it's you. You know, blink 3 times if you want us to wait 90 days before we report on it.
Well, so, okay, Grug, if that's the point, if that's the acceptable behavior, and I also see Bartholomew saying patch and move on, why are people giving Google such a hard time for burning those O days a few months back? Because they didn't tell us what the C2s were. They didn't tell us who the targets were. They didn't tell us, what the payloads were. They didn't tell us who the actors were. They just said we ran into, well, chances are we ran into a staging server that had a bajillion O days and we patched them. Goodbye. And like people were like, I don't like Shane Huntley, but like I wasn't throwing tomatoes at him on stage, right? I'm not blaming Maddie Stone. Like they did their fucking job. So what is the acceptable behavior and why are we judging them?
I think that that's completely fair. Just like I remember long ago, there was a guy in an IRC channel, I believe, who worked for, he did reverse engineering to do vuln except he got the bugs patched because he worked for a vendor. And like, people were a bit upset because like, dude, like, what the fuck? You're supposed to be doing that for outside, not, helping people. And he was like, fucking hack faster. I'm coming for your bugs. Like, get better. And that is a completely reasonable position to take. Like,
That's the tweet right there.
NSA cannot evade JAGs, then they don't deserve to be NSA. Like that's,
I'll take that t-shirt. Let's well, we're over time. I thought, folks might have to head out. We broke Dave's mic on purpose. Let's round out to at least the next 4 minutes. Silas, you published a report recently. You're looking quite dashing. You haven't gotten to say a word. What's on your mind, brother?
If I could just interrupt right there before we...
Listen, this has been great. I'm happy just to have been able to stop by at the end of today.
Fair enough. I'm being left with your OBS duties here.
A chance to point out that thanks to the Raid Shadow Legends, NordVPN, Kim Zetter,
the Setter Substack. I really do hope we can get Kim Setter here.
The Ridge Wallet, and
so
the World of Warships, like literally any of you guys who want to sponsor us, we are cheap.
We're cheap dates. Yeah, just a few wines and
key thing is a Zoom like webinar account.
That really is it.
Yeah.
Well, so on that front, let's hope that the folks digging up around Notre Dame don't unlock any of the cyber policy people from their lead sarcophagus, and that again, bringing it back to truth, justice, and the Ukrainian way. I think we've been at this for 2 months. It's great to hang out with everybody. It's great to get to discuss the cybers, but I do hope that in some miraculous fashion, this fucking war ends so that we can have a much nicer postmortem, hopefully with the CERT UA folks, and all of us get to have a great chat about what happened in the first
We
great
can take
cyber
the
war.
shields down.
Oh yeah,
finally.
yeah, and that's
We can
those
turn off
shields,
TFA and, you know, stop patching because
those
that
shields. If we could just get those shields down to what, Die Hard 2, that would just be great. But on that note,
that's what we're
glory,
looking for.
glory to Ukraine and fuck Putin, and thanks everybody for showing up. And if you would like to donate to our, you know, GoFundMe for Dave to get new pink kitty headphones, that's a necessity by next week. So thanks everyone. On that note, see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.